welcome Chris Sheridan. And for those of you who have never heard of Chris, he was in the band, is in the band, was in the band, Sweet Savage from the 80's. Every 20 years they have a reunion, so I'm waiting for the newest reunion.
It might be a tribute band for the
right. So if you need a bass player, no, I'm kidding. I wouldn't do that.
Hey, yeah, I don't think Lane wants to play anymore. So
All right.
You're in.
So I saw you guys and you came to my town, and it's like you know the story, but it's like you did it right. You pulled in like you were Van Halen, and you just like we didn't know any different, that you guys were, in other words, a big band in a club. Like you just did it huge. Everything you guys did was huge. And key to this is like you were all a part of the Sunset Strip scene, working hard on the record deals in LA, just at the cusp of things were starting to turn over. And anyway, mad respect, because that's my childhood, first of all.
Yeah.
But it's like, oh my God. In other words, you did the stuff that you really went after, the stuff that I wanted to when I was a kid. When I was like 21, that's like, I'm going to be a rock star. And I didn't have a clue because I wasn't anywhere near you guys. So, but anyway, so with that said, we're going to talk guitar today. This is going to be fun.
All right.
Okay. This is going to be fun. It's like little hacks. What we want is little hacks, whatever insights you can give on how to play the instrument, but and a little of your history too, because like we don't know any. Some of the people know about it because they've seen videos and stuff, but we want some of your history. So like, how did you get started with music, and how did you get started with the guitar and all that kind of thing? Where to start with you?
Well, it started when I was a kid. I was probably about 5 or 6. My mom got her piano, I guess, back from her mother's house, and it showed up, and she played and sang a song, I Think You Are My Sunshine, and it's like I'd never seen her sing or play before, and it was like, holy crap, like she did that. Like that was that kind of blew me away. So we took both my brother and I, Lane, took piano lessons. But we hated it. We hated practice. We didn't like the instrument. It wasn't really our thing. And then we kind of gave it up, and then got into band in like junior high. You know, Lane played drums, I played trumpet, and then marching band. But by like 78 or so, 1978, you know, we were heavily into rock music. We were skateboarding, listening to Rush and AC/DC. And this is obviously this is even before Highway to Hell, so it was kind of the older AC/DC stuff, Aerosmith, Molly Hatchet, anything that kind of had guitar rock, and it was Joey, me, and Lane, and we thought, look, we're never going to get to amount to anything skateboarding in Appalachia. You know, we knew we had to get to California. Plus, we were not all that great anyway, so we're like, and we're listening to all this music, and we're going to concerts. And it's like, well, let's just play. You know, Lane and I were already musical, and Joey always sang along with stuff. And it was kind of a transition that way. And everybody kind of picked their thing. Like my brother Lane, he wanted to play bass. He wasn't like a guitar player that couldn't figure it out and then picked up. You know, I played goalie in ice hockey growing up. And you know, a lot of times the goalie was the guy that couldn't skate too fast, and I'll just throw him in the net. But no, I wanted to be a goalie. I didn't want to do it. I set out to do that. So my brother set out to be a bass player. Loved Geddy Lee. Actually, Rush played his high school, same high school I went to. I wasn't in high school then. In '78, it was farewell to Kings. So you know, we're just absorbed, you know, around music and everything, and it just made sense that you know we could do that. So everybody had their own lane that picked out. And fortunately, Joey was a singer. So we have a singer, a guitar player, and a bass player kind of just built into our skateboard club. And it took off from there. I, being a couple years younger than Joey and Lane, wasn't really playing with them. But I would roadie for them, and I'd show up, and I'd maybe jam with them at rehearsals, things like that. I was kind of but I learned as they were learning. You know, they were trying to figure out stuff. We took old paint cans and put light bulbs in them, like colored light bulbs for our par can, cheap par cans. Made cabinets. We just, it was all do it yourself. So I was heavily involved, but I wasn't in that kind of first band. But I was jamming with my friends, had a couple guitar player friends, and we would trade licks. And that it was such a great way to learn because I might figure something out and then he might figure something different out. And then when we get together, it's like, oh, hey, I try this. And he's like, oh, I didn't know that. And he's like, well, I got this. And I'm like, oh, that helps. So we kind of leapfrogged each other. That was.
Did you guys did you have any like teachers? Did you try the teacher route, or was everything kind of by ear?
Yeah, by ear. But I had band instructors, band directors, I guess they're called. And I did take piano lessons and trumpet lessons earlier, like when I was 12 or something like that. So again, I think that was something I had an aversion to, was the discipline,
Oh, I understand. Yeah,
practice and authority and all this stuff, which
kumbaya.
It makes for a good rocker,
Yeah.
And then then by the time high school, we're all, we're playing our guitars more than we're playing our marching band instruments, and the hallway that had all the practice rooms. It was meant for, to practice your tuba, practice your flute, and do all that. So we just brought our amps in and we'd cut class and be there playing, playing Shock Me or whatever it was.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. Okay, so your first guitar heroes, who were they?
Well, I mean, Kiss was certainly an early band influence, but I was never, I guess until I really got into Eddie Van Halen, which wasn't until 79. It was always a band thing, and every band had a good guitar player. It was Joe Perry and Aerosmith. It was Alex Lifeson in Rush. It was, they were all good. They were all on covers of Guitar Player magazine.
Yeah.
But it wasn't. I always, and to this day, it's always been in the context of the band and the song. A lot of, I don't know, in the 80s, a lot of lead players were like, the song was just waiting until their solo, it was like an excuse.
The song was the backdrop of their solo.
Yeah. And for me, and some of this influence actually came from Eddie Van Halen, because like we were saying, Running with the Devil is like a little more of a melodic, it's not really a lead, it's like a melodic instrumental or interlude or something like that. Pretty Woman, their first big hit, didn't even have a lead on it at all. Ain't Talking About Love, it's not really a lead. It's some double stops and some twangy things that you can sing along with. But
Melody.
and then there's Eruption and all the other stuff on the same record.
Right.
So it fits the song. That taught me that even if you're Eddie Van Halen, you don't have to fill every song with and lead breaks, and which he did on some songs, and some songs he really held back. So that
I think that's the difference with Eddie Van Halen than a lot of the people that came later, like all the Shrapnel guys and all that, is he wrote songs.
Yeah.
He cared about the whole song. It wasn't just about noodling on the guitar.
Right.
It wasn't good for the song. It wasn't good. So,
and some of the leads I liked the most were the ones that you could sing along with. Kiss song, or
right.
Something that it was it was almost like a little instrumental. It fit the song, it coming into the lead and then coming out of it, merging back into the song, or going into a bridge or a breakdown or something like that. To me, that was always, and like I said, always, it's the thing that supports the song. It should add flavor or icing to a song, not cover it up or really be an aside. Sometimes it's like, oh, here's this song, and then, oh, now the lead's like in a different key or a different, and it's like, and then it goes back to the song. But, we're the really good bands, Rat and everything in the 80s. I thought, Warren's a great player. I think this song, like Round and Round, I mean, the lead fit the song. It was
right,
seamless. There wasn't this jarring, oh, now it's lead time and now we're out.
But the other thing is, when you hear that song, you want to hear that solo, because it's important. A part of that song is the riff is.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah,
okay.
Great point.
It's not one of those things that like a lot of, like, I guess the Ritchie Blackmore stuff, you can just improvise.
Yeah.
Sound fine. And maybe some of the like I'm teaching kids how to play like Working Man. That's like their gateway to Rush.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's the stuff we were playing. Very
Yeah.
blues based,
Yeah.
some bar, and it was logical because it follows the dots,
Yeah.
or whatever. It's in the. You didn't have to like do mental gymnastics to kind of figure out what
Right. Right.
the heck he was doing. Now you might not be able to play it like as well as he did, but you could.
You had the same toolbox that he had.
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
those things really, really helped.
So like the so that little that and it's kind of cool to think about how hard it was to learn this instrument back before they had YouTube and
Oh yeah, yeah. And
so
it was also the record. You had to pick up the needle and put it back.
you
pick
wouldn't
up-
have a guitar teacher that knew how to play the solo to Working Man. He would take you through the you didn't go through this and you were wise. Kumbaya,
Yeah,
Mexican hat dance, and
right.
everything was channeled through your ability to read. And it's like that's not essential. That is not essential stuff to to a guitar player ear. And so the first kind of like you learned bar chords and open chords early on, but you had some revelations as you started playing with people. You had some revelations that all that work wasn't always necessary to do.
Yeah, and it seems like everybody seemed like they picked up whatever they could pick up, and but then sharing it and seeing somebody else did it just kind of maximize the learning curve. But yeah, it's like once I sort of got bar chords is a great way to start, but I got opened up to the key, I guess, to these 2-string and 3-string chords that really made a difference. Like like Smoke on the Water. I mean, that's kind of everybody's early song. I can't even play it like that, but that's we'd start with bar chords.
Right.
And it's like, wow, that sounds great, and it's big and full, and it's got the low note.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
when you're playing in the context of a band, you've got the bass, so you don't really need, the low.
But the other part is there's a certain amount of space that the distortion takes care of.
Yeah.
In other words, it's like it makes the chord sound bigger than it is. Like you did if you which is just inverting the power chord.
Yeah, but those 2-string chords, it sounds more like Blackmore because that's how he played it.
Right.
Actually, that's how he played about half his songs is G with 2-string chords. But then it allows the bass to really carry that low. When you're in the room by yourself, you want to make it as full as possible because it sounds better. But with a band, you've got the bass, so there's this sound separation between the low and the higher.
Right.
And it really, that makes it actually bigger. So kind of less is more with some of that stuff.
Yeah. Do you remember some of the first songs you learned?
Wow, I don't even know. I mean, it was always like bits and pieces.
Okay.
I learned a riff or something like this. Probably. Cold Gin or something. It was, again, that's another 2-string chord progression. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's funny. Where were you? You were in Ohio.
Yeah.
What part of Ohio was it?
Southeastern. It's called Athens, Ohio, is the name of the town. Ohio University.
How
Great
far is
party
that from?
school.
How far away was that from Columbus?
It's about an hour and a half drive.
Okay.
So, we were kind of isolated, and Columbus is where you had to go see a show. Actually, Huntington, West Virginia was even closer for concerts. So a lot of bands, I saw Van Halen there early on, Rush in '78,
Yeah.
Aerosmith. I was trying to get my camera to where it's so hard to kind of get the guitar and the head in at the same
Right.
time. It's kind of I haven't really done a Zoom thing with the guitar. But yeah, and it was, it was good in a way because we had this small town. There wasn't much to pick from, but we all went to the same school. We all lived in the same neighborhood, so it was really easy to get together, and there really wasn't much else to do. We didn't have a lot of distractions. We weren't running around vandalizing or whatever kids do. We just, we wanted to play rock and roll.
Right. My parents, I think, worried about that. Like that was like back in the day. It's like if you played an electric guitar, that was the next step was vandalizing and sniffing.
I think it kept us out of trouble, to tell you the truth.
Right. I didn't bother with any of that. So okay, so the power chords. So with the power chords, and this little thing, I call that like a half step substitute.
Yeah.
That you can do that in certain that little half step movement's a cool little trick for power chords and and then other things I guess, and then this is just like 1978. We show each other riffs what was it? No, it's good. It's in the key of A minor.
Okay.
Do you remember that song? Or there's George Lynch.
Oh yeah.
Dream Warriors, and it's so anyway. So some of this stuff we can do with that with like power chords and moving fingers around and all that stuff works. Favorite riffs from the era. Do you have any favorite riffs? Because riff, as I define a riff, it's going to be melody within the guitar part somehow. So you're gonna have chord stuff going on with it, maybe, or let's trade a couple of those. When you go back to 1978, 79, what are the riffs?
Okay. Well, I couldn't play this early on, like when the record came out, but
I knew the. Yes.
That's kind of how the song goes.
Huh?
That's kind of how this. I like riff-oriented songs or riff-dominant songs,
Right.
Because when you ask somebody, like Zeppelin, how does Heartbreaker go? Nobody says Heartbreaker, we're getting man time. They go, it goes. That's how that song goes. That's just the riff. That's not the lyric. You can't even copyright that.
It's not even a chord progression.
No, the chorus isn't even over that. But that's how that song goes. How's it go? It goes.
Yeah. All right. So
signature, like the signature riff, I guess.
Yeah. Here's a thing that I'm into. Like from this, you're speaking 70s. I call it the Paul Kossoff chord, which everyone uses, but.
Suspended fourth?
Huh?
Like a suspended fourth?
Yeah. Well, it's like almost like a an A and a D. It's like that all right now chord sequence. So now that I bring that to your attention, everything you hear for the next 3 months is going to be.
Yeah.
Well,
that's all it takes sometimes. It's just that one note. If you're
right. Right. That's another one. He brought it up with cold gin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it only sounds that way if you do it that way. You can't fudge it with a bar chord or an open chord.
Right.
But it's just that one string going one fret, one half step down makes like this whole, I think those were some of my early revelations, was how simple, once you figured it out, how simple some of these things.
Then it's everything you hear.
Yeah, and then it's
Once
like,
you figure out the
that's
trick,
what he was doing. Oh, you know.
once you figure out the trick, there's some sort of brain, and you know better than I, there's some sort of brain thing that happens that now it's everything you notice.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
that little half step slide substitute thing.
Yeah.
So this thing right here, it's in thousands of songs.
Yeah.
As I said, it's like that triads, thinking in terms of triads, songs that I heard that Randy Rhoads back in the day when he was a teacher. Were you into Randy Rhoads at all? We never talked about that.
Yeah, for sure. You know, I mean, it was, you know, I mean, it's like he came on board and then he was gone almost, you know. I mean, it was almost too, you know, here and gone, but yeah, for sure. I think, you know, he was a little more of the classical, and Eddie more of the blues. You know,
Right.
you could hear those influences a little more, even though they both did both.
Yeah.
And certainly Eddie, I think, influenced, as he did everybody from that era and that time, you know, influenced Randy. But yeah, for sure. Again, it's one of those. As a matter of fact, I ripped off, unintentionally, I ripped off a part of was it Mr. Crowley in Head Over Heels, in the Sweet Savage EP. But it's, again, Randy had those really melodic solos. Right. You know, it's like if you can sing it or hear the melody in your head, it's like, I just love stuff like that. Shanker was good at that. A lot of, you know, some of his leads were, you know, you could sing them, like Shook Me All Night Long with Angus. I mean, that's, you got to almost note for note that thing, because that's how it goes. It's not just, you know, riff and E for 12 bars.
Right.
You know.
How important do you ever think about the importance of blues and like the Chuck Berry kind of influence?
Yeah, and probably more. It's probably even more important now, because back then you couldn't get away. You had to learn that stuff. You couldn't get away with sidestepping some of the, you know, the blues stuff, because that's what most of the stuff was. You know, Joe Perry and you know, everybody else, even Shanker especially, he stayed a lot in some of the blues boxes, even though he brought his own flavor, and he had, you know, it certainly his you know, his tone, everything is great about Shanker, but you kind of had to, because the bands you were learning from had that more present. But then once the 80s started going, you could start out, you know, with and it's like, wow, that sounded great. But if you want to,
that kind of sounds like the live Ace Frehley, the live 2 Ace Frehley.
yeah.
But then you were mentioning before. That whole, like Van Halen's taking Chuck Berry, and then he does his tapping thing.
And I think what happened is a lot of people, they just went straight for the tapping, and they kind of glossed over some of the bends and those things.
The fact that
that can be understated. I think even if you don't use them, and especially you don't want to sound necessarily like Chuck Berry, but all those things are in there. They're like the building blocks.
Right.
and he can make them it sound completely different. Like David Gilmour. I mean, that stuff is just straight blues box.
Right.
And once you play along with it, you're like, oh my God, I know what that is because I know I can play in the B blues box. But his tone and the way he goes about it, you don't hear Chuck Berry.
Right,
when,
right.
when you hear Gilmour, even though they're
Yeah.
probably 60%.
Now, guys like Ace Frehley, and Johnny Thunders. I recite Johnny Thunders, Ace Frehley, Angus Young. That's a little more. That's a little more obvious. Okay, we know you're taking from. Now, I'm not even sure Ace Frehley would say it. Chuck Berry. He probably learned it from Mick Taylor, who
Good point.
took it from Chuck Berry. When we say Chuck Berry licks, what I'm referring to is like that 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2. That to me is like that is Ace Frehley, but it's also Chuck Berry. Chuck Berry did it in the 50s.
That was such Ace's signature, He would play like he would play like the first note twice and kind of. Yeah.
So now back to the Randy Rhoads thing. When he was teaching, somewhere along the line, I heard that he was really into the Steve Miller Band. Was it Swing Time or Swing Town?
Okay.
Okay, so that.
Oh yeah, that's Crazy Train.
Yeah. Or another one that, since you're an 80s or not 70s 80s kid, 70s kid, My Sharona. That whole solo section, the triads on that. So probably a good place to start with getting this rock guitar thing together is just checking out. Get your doctoral thesis on 70s guitar riffs.
Yeah. It's a good education, and it'll carry you further than if you just learn from people that were influenced by that. Now, you don't have to go back. You don't have to sound like Muddy Waters or, some scratchy recording from the 1930s. But
Right.
But it's built from the same stuff. I mean,
Right.
Even Iron Maiden, some of those guys early on, and that. It's not that much of a departure. Now the trick then is you're using some of the same ingredients in your recipe, but you're kind of baking something different or trying to make that your own, and just steer away from some of the obvious cliche like, oh, that sounds just like this other thing.
Right.
But I was so often surprised, like how how do they do that? Wow, how does that sound like that? What's he playing? And then you figure it out, and it's like it's in the blues box, but it doesn't sound like that. It's okay. So Angus,
That is one of those songs that I think like people should learn absolutely note for note as best they can.
Yeah, it's an education because you learn so much. There's so much going there, but there's nothing in that was really outside of that, standard pentatonic blues box. But he really, it fit the song. It's melodic. You can kind of sing it.
And he's mixing he's mixing that the minor pentatonics like this. That's minor pentatonic. That's major pentatonic. something like that.
Yeah.
Then he goes up to that 15th position. That's one of those, as I said, not all of his songs I think are necessarily note for notes. That one is.
Yeah. That one is. Yeah, I gotta do that.
Yeah. So, anything else? Anything else? We have triads. We hit the triads. We hit the dyads. All kinds of dyads we can do. Like, do you ever try these? Like the thirds and that kind of stuff. All kinds all kinds of possibilities. So it's kind of like to me it sounds like Richie Blackmore. Like when he went foreigner sounding, but I still like the guitar stuff on it.
Yeah.
Stone Cold era. Lots of my favorite stuff. All right, Chris. Thank you for this. We should do more of this.
All right.
Okay. Favorite riff. Give me one favorite riff that nobody knows.
I'll give you. We're talking about lessons and learning. I'll give you one guess. Who taught me how to play just that opening riff to "Running with the Devil"? Take a guess.
I hope it's not Eddie.
Well, there you go.
Did he teach it to you?
He gave me a private guitar lesson.
So why am I now learning this?
Well, there were 10,000 other people there.
Okay.
But I was this is back with festival seating. I think it was 1980 tour. And, I'm up front and I'm just doing like that. And when Dave Lee Ross, grabbing his crotch and doing all this stuff, I'm like looking at Eddie like this. And of course, years and years of them playing clubs and parties.
Right.
And I know too, in the first 5 rows, who's looking at you, who's looking at their phone, without even paying attention. You just radar those people out and who, where the girls are and all this stuff. But the guitar player's a guy going like that, looking at him. What the hell is he doing? And, you just think you want to play a nice big fat bar chord. And I'm looking at him like this, and he goes, I swear to God, he saw me, and he goes.
That's one.
Like it's one finger.
Right.
Let's pick at me,
How many of those do we know?
Yeah.
I'm trying. How many of those? Okay, so I owe this one to you because I in all my years I never. I made it this far in life and never learned that riff.
Yeah.
Till this morning.
Okay, nice. But that's Cat Scratch Fever in A. It's Let It Go by Def Leppard. I mean, there's so many. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
there's so many things you can do bouncing off that screen.
My point is, you were in Ohio. I was in Pennsylvania. Yet the language that we were ingesting was the same. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. More of this later. Thank you so much.
Let's do it. Thanks for having me.
Hi, this is Rod from Boomer Guitar Sessions. I personally wanted to thank you for being part of our community. If you like what we're doing here and you want to see more of it, please hit the like, subscribe, and share. And this helps me spread my musical messages to all over the world. Thank you. I appreciate you. And always remember, you can do this.